This is Johnny with TigerBomb MMA, and today I'm going to go over UFC 311 Makhachev versus Tsarukyan 2 and Dvalishvilli versus Nurmagomedov, giving you my thoughts and predictions on the entire 14-bout card. Interesting main event here. This is taking place in Los Angeles, California, more realistically Inglewood, California, where I somewhat grew up, had family there, spent most of my time in Inglewood. And if you've ever been there, it went from like hoochies and hood rats and gangbanging to like now there's a football team and the Clippers play there. So it's kind of nuts, and I'm a little pissed off that ever since I moved, it got really nice. But it's going to be a great time. If anyone is going and you want to know some spots to hit up for food, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, overall, great main event. Was originally planning to go. Things didn't really pan out. And then the fires hit. Definitely not going to go now. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about these fights and give you my thoughts on them. A couple short notice bouts are happening now, so it's all here and there, so we'll get into it. But before I do that, I wanted to talk about the previous card, which would have been the Dern versus Hebas fight. And if you want to skip my overall thoughts on that, you can do so now. I'll flash the screen so you can actually just skip that. But yeah, overall for this fight card, pretty good. I went 7-7, not optimal, but it's 50% starting off the year, so I'm not necessarily butthurt. I'm down 3 units. I predicted a couple things that would happen pretty accurately, but my bets ended up not the best. And I kind of read that a lot of people also had like starting of the year kind of bad luck, or just things were a little off. But first fight of the night, Nurullo Aliev defeats Joe Solecki. As expected, I expected Aliev to look a little bit better on the feet. It is what it is. He's what now, 10-0. Solecki, I don't know if they're going to keep him, but he didn't really put up much of a fight. Fatima Klein defeats Dudakova, beat Dudakova so bad that I'm assuming her husband is going to be sleeping on the couch for a while. She got beat bad, and that's kind of what I expected from her. I expect a little bit more, but Fatima Klein just proved to be the much better fighter. The fact that she finally got a finish of a pretty decent opponent, sky's the limit for this girl. Bruno Lopez defeats Magomed Gadziasulev. Now, I was on Gadziasulev, but primarily for the reason that I didn't think Lopez would have that kind of a high IQ. He did exactly what I wanted him to do. Didn't pick him to win, didn't bet him to win. Ultimately, Bruno showed high fight IQ in this fight. Gadziasulev was a big fraud, said it from the beginning, and he didn't really engage in the fight that I wanted him to fight. I wanted him to stay on the outside. He himself would engage in the clinch where he was getting dominated, and I'm like, this guy's a moron. Props to Lopez. Anyone who bet Lopez, good on you. Karakate defeats Nakali Cagliari. I actually bet Karakate. Her line didn't change despite the fact that I predicted, well, I didn't predict. I saw that she won the first round, at least in my eyes. So I took her at like minus 260. Unfortunately, went to a split decision. Cagliari showed some toughness in there. She showed some good stuff, but the improvements of Karakate, or as I like to call her, carrot cake, were there. You know, takedown defense was there. She does need to improve a little bit more for my liking. The fact that she can definitely win these fights. She could have won this one 30-27, but it keeps going to split because she allows her opponents to dictate the pace when she should be the one doing so. She should be the one landing knees. She should be keeping from far away. She's the bigger girl. And it is what it is. It just is what it is. Cagliari, not necessarily a bad look for her. I'm excited to see the improvements of both ladies. Jacoby Smith defeats Preston Parsons. Not much to say there. Jacoby Smith did exactly what we expected him to do. Now, Thiago Moises versus Trey Ogden, I felt I predicted this one perfectly. The leg kicks was the primary factor as to why Moises won. To me, he looked promising immediately, but then as I thought he would, something would get into his ear, something buries into his head saying, hey, you're doing too well, probably lay off the gas a little bit, and then he allowed Trey Ogden to push the pace. He made Trey Ogden look better than I thought he is. And then the leg kicks became a bigger factor in the second round where he essentially dropped Trey, got on top of him, proved that he has the much better jiu-jitsu. Then round number 3, Trey Ogden pushes the pace, gets reversed. Moises kind of handles him. Moises, again, I don't think he's the type of guy you need to consider betting going forward. I think in this situation, he made it way too close than it needed to be against a guy he could have dominated. He just does not pull the trigger sometimes. Marco Tulio defeats Ihor Pretoria. Not much to say there. Marcos did what we expected him to do. He got the knockout. Ihor continues to get fouled. And it seems like he has bad luck, but I think the bad luck is that he's not necessarily a great fighter. And Tulio, again, I don't consider him to be all that great. I want to see more from the guy, but at least he passed the Ehor test, which is not necessarily a big test in itself. It's like, hey, can you spell your name? And he spelled his name fine. Moving on, Felipe Bunes defeats Jose Johnson. I thought Johnson looked fantastic. I had a parlay with Johnson. I had all the big favorites plus Johnson because instead of just betting Johnson, I'm like, screw it, I'll add guys that are going to definitely win, spice up those odds. Looked great. Got way too overconfident in the mat. And Felipe Bunes, being a black belt himself, Johnson thought he could beat him on the ground, no problem. What he needed to do was wait until he tired out, and then you can beat him on the ground. Ultimately, he looked great on the feet. He got way too cocky, like another fighter we'll talk about, and Bunes took advantage. So props to Bunes. I'm happy for him. For Johnson, if he's going to stay in the UFC, which I'm not sure if they'll give him another shot after this. This was a big mess up on his part. But if they do keep him, he needs to chill out. He needs to he has to game plan better, essentially. And that was rough for me because I thought he is the better fighter. He was proving to be the better fighter, and then he just made a mistake and he got caught. Punahele Soriano defeats Earls Medic. I was 50-50 on this one because I just knew Medic, he has that fraud in him. And Puna kind of sucks, but if he lands, he's going to put you out, and that's exactly what happened. Punahele just bum rushed him. Medic did not move out of the way. He got cracked, and he went down. Puna finished him easily. And I think the experiment of Medic, he was minus 200. Yeah, that sucked, man. Like he's from Alaska. Let's just put it that way. That scene has never been great, and he just never has shown those improvements. When he's bullying these dudes, guys who are not as good as strikers as he is, or guys who don't have as much power as he does, he looks great. You'll take a minus 200 in the next fight. But he gets dropped by a guy like Puna Soriano, who, again, his striking is pretty rudimentary. And the fact that he got cracked with that just kind of solidifies the fact that everything I thought about him was accurate. Christian Rodriguez defeats Austin Bashi. I was very, very high on Bashi. And I still am, because the Austin Bashi that fought this Christian Rodriguez, I thought he still did pretty well, despite the fact that Christian handled him very, very easily. This was a different level of Christian. I did not expect this version of Christian to come out. I even joked about him, at a certain point, maybe straight C-Rod might be the new Chuck with that look in his eyes. This straight C-Rod might actually win the title. His hips looked incredible. Typically, C-Rod wants to get his hips as close to another man as possible, but in this case, what do you call that? Gay camp, essentially. Conversion camp. Christian Rodriguez, his hips were super far away. That was like the most impressive stuff. So I was glad to see the improvement of Christian, but let's be realistic here. Austin Bashi didn't look bad. We just saw a much better version, a much more experienced version of Christian. And I think that Bashi's going to get undervalued in his next fight, depending on who they pair him up with. And he's probably going to run through him. So I'm not necessarily out of the Austin Bashi business. I don't want to bash Bashi either. He looked good. He did his best against a really tough opponent. And this was a much better opponent than his last fight. And this was a much better guy than we saw even in his fight against Dolgarian. So props to both men. Bashi's still very young. I really thought he was going to be able to handle him on the mat. That second round was looking good, but props specifically to Christian because as a fan of his, step in the right direction. Next bout, we've got Kopylov versus Chris Curtis. Roman wins round number one. Chris wins round number two. Round number three was basically Roman, and then that head kick happens, and I'm happy because Chris Curtis more or less deserves that. I don't like how he reacts in those situations, and to me that was perfect. Like he was about to lose this decision either way. The fact that they stopped it was kind of poetic to me, and there was another more or less short or early stoppage, in the card later on. To me, if you compare those two, which would have been the Carlston Harris, if you think the Carlston Harris stoppage was justified, then the Chris Curtis one was more than justified. Like he was out cold. In this case, I can understand his frustration, but the fact that he kept bitching about it to me was ridiculous. He was going to lose anyways, so kind of fuck Chris Curtis. Next bout, we've got Cesar Almeida versus Razak Al Hassan. I predicted Al Hassan, wasn't sold on him, but the fact that he could wrestle and can crack really kind of gave me that maybe I should lean on him specifically because he has, the nicer price tag. Didn't end up betting him. I avoided it. I actually ended up accidentally betting Cesar Almeida. Long story short, the casino screwed up. Power went down. Whatever. Those who had Razak, I feel bad for you because he was doing very well. He dropped him. He controlled him. Cesar showed that he can get back up, which is impressive. And Al Hassan, I don't know what he did. Well, I know what he did to deserve it, but the fact that God doesn't like Razak Al Hassan, because he was going to win that fight. He was looking good. He had that first round in the bag, and then that wrath of God left hand from Cesar Almeida, who to me is not really known to have that kind of power. It was truly Al Hassan putting himself in a bad position to get knocked out. So, man, it must have sucked if he had money. I know people did have some money on Al Hassan. He was looking great, and then karma in that left hand for Cesar Almeida. Again, Cesar, I'm a big fan of Cesar. I think he is the type of guy that is investing himself to become a more well-rounded fighter, and it's showing. Yet there's still some holes there because despite his high-level striking, it doesn't necessarily always translate well into MMA. But the fact that he landed that punch, I started freaking the fuck out. But anyways, Ponzinibbio defeats Carlston Harris. I'm a little salty. I had Harris to win, picked him to win. I took him inside the distance or no action, and it was looking good. Like, despite anything, I'm like, yeah, if Harris doesn't get the finish, he'll get the win. If he doesn't get the win, it'll go to a decision, and then I'll just get my money back. Bothered me because he won the first round. He dropped Ponzinibbio. He won the second round. Apparently he didn't. I thought he did. Two judges gave the second round to Ponzinibbio. I understand why. He was doing better, but he still got dropped. I thought Harris was still the one landing the cleaner shots. So no matter what I would have lost, sucks. But the way that they stopped that fight, I get it. I understand why they stopped it. Harris was kind of like fumbling all over the place, but don't stop the fight when the guy's throwing a punch. Give him a little bit more time. I'm not salty about it. It's just, it irks me a little bit. But Ponzinibbio, I think I kind of predicted it correctly. It's just that Harris, despite dropping Ponzinibbio, he didn't have enough time to finish him up on the ground or try to lock up a submission. Harris, I thought, looked good, and just kind of sucks. But props to Ponzinibbio getting back on track. Mackenzie Dern defeating Amanda Ribas. I did have Ribas to win. I did put a bet on Ribas to win. I had the over 1.5 and her to win as well on a parlay. Mackenzie Dern did everything I did not expect her to do. I thought she was going to revert back to her old self, not being able to get takedowns. She looked good, got a takedown on Ribas. And the one criticism that I had about Mackenzie Dern was she cannot control from the top position. What does she do in this fight? She maintains the control from the top position. And as a fan of hers, happy to see that. I lost 3 units in this card. I'm going to get them back. There's no doubt about it. I'm not worried about that. But the improvements from Dern, fantastic. Maintained the position on top. She always threatened from the bottom. She stayed composed. I think her striking looked incredibly better because she wasn't rushing. She was just staying patient on the outside. She was doing enough to win. To me, that shows evolution. She's not panicking. She's not overthinking things. She's not needing to rush things. And because of that, way more dangerous. The fact that she got that armbar, she hasn't submitted anyone in a while. And for her to submit Amanda Ribas, the first person to do so, incredibly impressive. So props to Mackenzie Dern and her megatons. But moving on to the primary card here, we have got first fight of the night for 311. Let's go down here. We've got a flyweight bout. We have got Tagir Ulanbekov versus Clayton Carpenter. Minus 325 for Ulanbekov. Come back on Carpenter plus 260. I don't know if you think this, but I think this is way too much for Clayton Carpenter. I think there's a path for victory here. He's a very good grappler, but Tagir fought the much better competition. Even recently went into a grappling match with Jussier Formiga. He did lose that match, but it shows that he's still the better of the two guys. Like Clayton Carpenter has struggled with certain competition, and that is, for example, Lucas Rocha. Rocha was piecing him up on the feet until he took him down. Damn, Juan Camilo Rodanes, or whatever his last name is, the cokehead, he took down Clayton Carpenter. And that's not to say, oh my God, he got surprised by it. I understand that. It's just the fact that he's only fought this level of competition. Tagir, despite, say, if you want to say, oh, well, he lost to Tim Elliott, another high-level wrestler. I don't want to get into that specifically, but that's still a Tim Elliott. That's a name. He's fought Bruno Silva, Alan Nascimento, a much more dangerous guard game. The way Clayton needs to win this fight, if he can, is to put the pressure on Tagir. Tagir's grappling is a little iffy sometimes. He is the weakest of that team, the Nurmagomedov group. But ultimately, he'll get the job done. He's going to be the bigger guy. He's going to have the longer reach. I think his striking has improved. Minus 325. I like him in this spot. I like him to win by a decision. And for me, ultimately, it came down to is Clayton Carpenter at this point. He's 28 years old. The way I view it is, if he was 23, I'd think, wow, this kid is a major prospect. At 28, he's 8-0. I don't necessarily view him as the complete product yet, and I think he's a little behind. I think he's gotten away with just being incredibly talented. I think he's gotten away with being physically strong. And at 28, I want to see a little bit more. Tagir, despite me thinking he's the bottom of the barrel of the group along with Babukar and Nurmagomedov, I still think he's a lot better than Clayton at this very moment. I want to see how he handles this, and we'll go forward. But again, the way to beat Nurmagomedov, put the pressure on him, control him. Ultimately, though, I think Tagir will get him to the ground. I think he's got the better wily techniques on the feet. I think he'll be competitive for a bit, but with that length, I think he's just going to put it on him eventually, get him to the ground, control him there. Clayton's got good jiu-jitsu, but again, Tagir's fought Nascimento, really good off of his back, survived all that. Give me Tagir. This is not a grappling match. This is an MMA bout. Tagir wins this one by a decision. Moving on here, we've got Ricky Turcios versus Bernardo Sopaj. This has been rebooked, I believe, once or twice. Ricky, he is plus 280. Come back on Bernardo. Bernardo. I can't say it. It's a Spanish name. How could I not say Bernardo? The Lion King. He is minus 355. Originally, when it was booked, I was kind of leaning Ricky because, the knockout, obviously. The knockout was just so recent. It's been almost a year. It's been 9-10 months since the Vinicius Oliveira knockout where he looked great. I mean, he looked, in my eyes, like the better prospect. And then, being short notice, he got tired, fought a bigger man, got knocked out. One of the most vicious knockouts in the UFC of the previous year. That was ridiculous. But despite that, I think Bernardo's much better, much cleaner, more well-rounded than Ricky. Ricky, he has potential to be such a good fighter, but he's a bit of a moron. And I say that in a very, very hateful way, not in a positive way. The guy, man, how many times has he let people down? That fight with Zahabi, you go back, he's not doing anything. He's just stomping the ground. He's just overconfident in many different ways. He is very good off of his back. He's very good at scrambling. He's got nasty jiu-jitsu. But ultimately, I always viewed Ricky as a left hook magnet. The guy eats punches. The guy gets dropped. The guy's having life and death matchups with Kevin Natividad, who's roughly the same size as Bernardo Sopaj, about 5'6", 5'7". So if you're thinking maybe the height's going to play a factor, it could. But we've seen a guy in Natividad who is a decent fighter, but nothing too special. I view Sopaj to be a very special guy. I see him being well-rounded, more well-rounded than Ricky, better striking. I think he can maintain top control without getting punished from Ricky. I think he can control Ricky as well. If he wants to just keep it on the feet, I can see that happening. Ricky maybe getting a sub is possible because he is so tricky off of his back and to create the scrambles. But ultimately, I do like Sopaj. I don't like the number on him. Him having the backing of Hamza, training at All-Stars. Just looking at this guy, he's got the goods. It's just minus 355, I'm not a big fan of that. It's one of those that I'm willing to just kind of pass up on. I also think this has a possibility of going to a split decision. Ricky's kind of known to go to these splits. Like he went to a split with Brady Heastan. He went to a split with Natividad. Unless Sopaj just knocks him out cold, if this becomes one of those kind of back and forth battles where maybe Ricky tries to get takedowns, and Ricky has been working his takedowns going to Team Alpha Male, but I don't see him having a whole ton of success against a more well-rounded younger man in Sopaj. But give me Sopaj to win this one by a knockout in the second round. I think he can catch Ricky, who leaves his chin so exposed. He's primarily a kicker. And with those kicks, it leaves him incredibly exposed when he's throwing them naked. So give me Sopaj to land something, a nasty counter, knock him out. Sopaj round number 2. Next bout, we've got Rinya Nakamura versus Muin Gafurov. Whoopsie doodle. And wow, minus 450 for Rinya. Come back on Muin Gafurov plus 330. My initial thoughts were this is a much more difficult matchup for Rinya. So those odds are maybe not justified, but after doing tape and really studying Rinya, I think they are justified, and I'll explain in a bit, but I want to talk about Muin because it might be a little bit easier to talk about him. With Muin Gafurov, never been impressed by the guy. I think his last performance, despite winning and looking better and improved, he still showed so many holes, and those holes are primarily in his brain because he has some of the worst fight IQ that I've seen. He has some of the worst technique. He leaves himself exposed. He bum rushes. Although his striking is very serviceable, I mean, nice low calf kicks. He spinning back kicks, spinning wheel kicks. He will bum rush you. He's a guy that puts a lot of pressure on you. But I was telling people in the Discord today, he fights like a not mentally ill, a fucking retarded monkey. He goes forward. It just bothers me. It bothers me how often he leaves himself open. He's a decent fighter outside the UFC. I think he can dominate a lot of guys outside the UFC, but I don't view Muin Gafurov as UFC caliber. Just because you beat a guy in Kang Ho Kang, who is at the sunset of his career, doesn't mean nothing to me. The fact that Kang was able to dominate him momentarily, he had mount, he was threatening from the back. That was one of the worst 30-27s I've seen. Muin won every round, but to hear, he got 30-27s, you see the fight, there was no moment there where it was like a clear 10-9 for Gafurov. There was chances that you could have given that round at a certain point to Kang Ho Kang with those, top control with the mount. It is the weakest 30-27 I've ever seen. Maybe I'm a little biased against them, but I like to see, what they do well. And what he's going to do well here is that he's going to pressure Rinya. If Rinya isn't ready for that type of pressure, that type of striking, that wildness in him, the power that he's going to throw at him, then there's a chance Rinya can lose. But what I see in Rinya is when you compare the two, wrestling's more or less going to negate themselves. I think Rinya, obviously the much better, more higher caliber wrestler, way higher caliber wrestler. I've seen Muin get taken down when he shouldn't be getting taken down, getting controlled real easily. I mean, he's not the type of guy that I consider to have really high-level top control. Rinya, what I was most worried about was his striking, but going back and watching his tape, the guy's striking is pretty solid. He doesn't do anything spectacular. When this guy doesn't feel any threat coming his way, like in his UFC debut, or not debut, was it his debut officially against Kazama for the finale of the Road to UFC? He felt little threat in that guy because he knew I'm better than this guy. He's not going to take me down. That's the only way he can beat me. That he destroyed his brain, knocked him out. And then, he showed poise against Fernie Garcia, and he showed intelligence against Carlos Vera. He controlled them. Although I remember the Carlos Vera the fight being a little weird. I remember it kind of incorrectly. I thought that Rinya looked like he was having some trouble. He was never in any trouble in that fight. What I can say about Rinya where he's lacking is the submission threats, right? Against Fernie, let me check my notes, but against Fernie, he attempted like 4 or 5 submissions, and they were all different. He attempted a north-south choke. He could not finish it. He attempted a straight arm lock. He couldn't finish that either. He also attempted an arm bar, if I remember correctly. Could not finish that either. They were all very tight, but he just could not finish them. So he needs to definitely work on that. He's training in ATT now. He's training with a legend in Horiguchi as well. I want to see his improvements, but at 9-0 at minus 450, even with just his pure athleticism, I think he can beat Muin Gafurov. It will take a big mental break from Rinya to have Muin beat him. And it's a possibility. Crazier things have happened, but even with his striking, dude is smart. He's capable with the high kicks. His boxing's not terrible. It just, he doesn't highlight it so much. That's the improvements I want to see. I want to see the improvements in the submission game and a little bit more confidence in the striking. I can say that Muin is a more confident striker because he'll throw. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's pretty or not. He will throw because he doesn't seem to care. Again, retarded monkey. But Rinya, he's more calculated. He thinks a lot. I think he's going to have the higher IQ. He will pick his spots. He will get those takedowns. And even if he doesn't get them cleanly by pure force and might, he will get Muin Gafurov down. Give me Rinya to get this one by a decision. I might look into Rinya, maybe over 1.5, depending on what the line is. But Rinya, I view him as being a very high-level guy with high-level IQ. But ultimately, there's still a couple things I want to see from him. That way, when he is minus 450, I can comfortably accept the fact that he's going to take someone down, either pound them out, which he does have some good ground and pound, but primarily threaten with the submissions as well and actually finish them. So give me Rinya to win this one by a decision. We've got next bout, bantamweight, Karol Rosa versus Ailin Perez. Rosa minus 185 comeback on Perez is plus 155. You know, if you think back and if you lost money on Karol Rosa against Sarah McMahon, you still harbor those like angry feelings that she couldn't stuff takedowns. So you worry about Karol Rosa, who I think is a much cleaner, better fighter, black belt in jiu-jitsu. She's a lesbian, so you know how well that plays in women's MMA. Ailin Perez, I've seen her do things to confirm she is not a lesbian. The internet is a fun place. But for Karol Rosa, again, better striker, better Muay Thai, blue belt in Muay Thai, black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. I think she can definitely control Perez on the mat. I think she can probably get back up against Perez. Perez doesn't have the best control. Her main weapon for control is her big booty, which she just lays on top of girls. But Karol Rosa might not mind that. Ailin Perez, as much as I like her, like I really do like Ailin Perez, plus 155, not necessarily a bad line to take if she can maintain that control against Karol Rosa, who, if you look at her past fights, she can kind of mentally break as well. She doesn't do enough. She can let the rounds escape her. The ultimate thing is if Perez can't get a takedown, her striking's not going to be as clean as Rosa. The low kicks from Rosa are going to really affect the ability for Perez to kind of shoot in there. When Perez blitzes in, a nice hard low kick counter can probably stumble her, and that's where Karol Rosa can get on top and maintain that control, where she's going to have the better control ability than Perez. Perez is mainly, from what I can tell, you know, I haven't been seeing her training tape in the gym. I don't know if she's practicing her doubles or singles, but mainly likes to get takedowns via the clinch, body locks, you know, the head and arm throws, the OP head and arm throws in women's MMA. And in that case, if Rosa can maintain distance and maybe land some knees with the clinch, she can avoid getting taken down. I like Rosa in this spot. I'm not thrilled about it because I still view it more of a 50-50 matchup where the lean is on Karol Rosa. Give me Rosa to win this one by a decision. You know, bust her up with elbows. Just prove to me that you are the better fighter, because she is. She is the better fighter, but she often forgets that. She often doesn't fight like that. Perez, she's the more scrappy of the two. A little less doubt in her mind, and doubt in a fight can definitely harbor your abilities or hinder your abilities to perform. Look at Moises. If you had money on Moises and you were scared out of your mind that he was going to lose, I can picture the same thing happening here with Karol Rosa. So give me Rosa by a decision. Not thrilled about it. Not thrilled about the line. Next bout here, we've got Grant Cage GD Dawson versus Diego Ferreira. Ferreira plus 240, come back on Dawson minus 300, which is actually, surprised it's not a larger line. Minus 300's kind of accurate. I'll speak this real quick, but if you're picking Ferreira, you're hoping that he knocks out Grant Dawson or Grant Dawson gets tired. Ferreira's 40 years old, right? I think in his last two fights, you know, he was looking a little weathered and a little tired. Not tired, but like old. He looked really old against Michael Johnson. And then he landed at overhand right, knocked him out. against Rebecki. Rebecki was doing well, but Rebecki gassed himself out trying to knock out Diego Ferreira. He didn't respect what was coming back to him. And Ferreira, if we're being honest with his wealth of history in the UFC, all that tape that we have on him, is really good at getting back up, really good at creating scrambles, really good at using his butterflies, putting his feet to the hips, pushing people off. And Grant Dawson, what we know about him is that he is takedown or die. If he can't get a takedown, he's kind of left to his own devices on the feet. And I know he's been training his striking. Low kicks are good, knees up the middle, but his chin, that chin is a high liability. I think still Grant's going to win. I will pick him to win by either a decision or possibly a finish in round number 3. The reason I am more confident in Grant Dawson is the type of striker that Bobby Green is to hurt him. That's a very specific type of striker. Carlos Ferreira, with him, he is the better striker between him and Grant Dawson. He does have the better chin. The issue is that Grant's just the much more superior wrestler. He is going to be the lankier of the two. He's going to be the bigger of the two, the stronger of the two. Grant Dawson's whole game is controlling dudes on the ground, whether it be by taking the back, maintaining heavy top control. And Ferreira, despite the fact that he is very difficult to hold down, the type of guys that are really giving him issues are guys that can actually maintain top control with heavy pressure and have a solid wrestling game. You go back and you see his fight against Benny Dariush, and despite this guy having some of the best scrambles, the best get-ups in that division, Benil was able to maintain him because he's got equally the good amount of wrestling and a very good amount of jiu-jitsu control as well, which I do see in Grant Dawson, him handling Joe Selecki, who's a very good guy off of his back. He was still able to maintain him, but apples and oranges because Joe Selecki won't try to get back up. Ultimately, my reasoning for Grant Dawson, I don't love the line. I hate even picking him, but the tape indicates that he's going to do what he does best. Like, he's going to push forward. He's going to not gas himself out. That's the main thing. Do not tire yourself out relentlessly going for these takedowns. And I saw that improvement against Rafa Garcia, my bad. He ain't Brazilian. He's Rafa Garcia. He took him down, maintained control, busted him up, landed damage. That was the main thing. He did damage. He has to do that here against Ferreira as well. Tire him out, take his back with those lanky-ass legs, wrap him up, beat him up. And I can see a lot of success. Diego's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's a high-level dude, still at 40 years old. The durability is not quite there. I still rate his durability higher than Grant Dawson. If Diego lands a punch and if Diego can stuff the takedowns, the improvements I've seen from Grant, I still believe are going to lead him to a decision, to a victory. In general, the ability to just kind of stay calm on the outside. Dude threw a beautiful spinning back kick against Rafa Garcia last, and that to me shows him being more comfortable striking. And that's something I've yet to have seen from Grant until that last fight. But yeah, give me Grant Dawson to win this one. Put the pressure on Ferreira, put the pace on him, control him, just relentlessly getting him tired. He's at 40 years old. I can see him winning this one by either just straight control or doing enough damage in round number 3 to get that stoppage. So give me Grant Dawson. Not a big fan of it, but I do think that he can very well look minus 300 or higher against Ferreira, who is, on paper, a very dangerous guy. Very dangerous fight for Grant Dawson, but 30 years old versus 40-year-old, with the level of guys that he's training with at American Top Team, with that level of jiu-jitsu, just give me Grant Dawson in this spot. Next bout, we've got a short notice one here. It is Zachary Reese versus Azamat Bekoev. Yeah, it was supposed to be Reese versus Dumas. And when I heard about the fight, I'm like, yeah, Dumas is not taking this fight. I'm surprised he even agreed to it. I'm not accusing him of pulling out for obvious reasons, but he was not going to win that fight. Now we've got Bekoev, who reality is a much more difficult fight for Zachary Reese, primarily because he's a better wrestler. Zachary Reese, to me, I don't want to say he's first round or bust because he's not. It's just he has a lot of success early because he kind of blows all of his energy trying to get a submission, trying to get a finish, which he's a dangerous dude, 6'4", 77-inch reach, 5 inches in reach, and like 5 inches in height against Bekoev. This one's going to be tough because in a proper world, if Bekoev was taller, I would assume he would just take him down, rinse and repeat, just avoid the submissions of Zachary Reese, who's very good off of his back. He will throw up triangles. He'll try to sweep you. And to me, I think he does have a limited amount of cardio, being so big, cuts so much weight at 185 that, he'll get tired. So the way that Azamat can win this one, tire this guy out, avoid getting submitted. The problem is, I don't know if Bekoev has that kind of submission defense. He's going, I don't want to say life and death with guys who are like 19-10 and like Chauncey Foxworthy, but Foxworthy was putting him in bad position. Foxworthy took him down. He went to a split decision with Dylan Budka. This dude made me believe that Dylan Budka's takedown defense and get-up game was superior. I don't think he has that kind of ability, but despite that, I still don't necessarily think that Zachary Reese has that kind of ability because he's so comfortable playing off of his back. But even then, I've seen Bekoev get threatened off of his back with triangles, and if Zachary Reese gets him in the triangle, he is going to tap him out. I'm not thrilled about it. There's no line yet. I'm curious to see what the line is, but I would go with Zachary Reese submission or just inside the distance within the first 2 rounds, because if Bekoev, this could be a very good live betting situation in my opinion. If Bekoev can survive early, I think he can start taking over. Problem is he's small. I don't think that matters when Zachary Reese is on his back and he's in side control, kind of kneeing him to the body and controlling him, and Zachary Reese's like energy bar goes down. Again, this is a much tougher fight. Even though it's on short notice for Zachary Reese, I will still take Reese. Prediction only. Give me second round submission. Next bout, we've got at heavyweight, we've got Jailton Almeida versus Sergey Spivac. To keep it clean, I'm going to go with Almeida by a submission in the first round. They are practically the same size. Almeida is a much better grappler. You can say all you want about Spivac, like, oh my God, Spivac's got judo, he's got wrestling, blah, blah, blah. He can maintain. He won't. He won't do it. Almeida's too strong. He's too athletic. He's too jacked. He is the God King Almeida for a reason. Minus 400. It's crazy. So you know how you got to play this. You got to take him by inside the distance, round number 1, within the first 2 rounds, whatever you feel more comfortable with making money with Almeida. But Spivac to me has always been a low-level heavyweight that just happened to get into the top 10. His last fight, let's talk about it. Tybura. I picked Tybura. I bet Tybura. And Tybura gave him the easiest armbar. I'm like, I even said like, oh, I think he's setting up an armbar. And Tybura allowed it to happen. And that bothered me. That's not going to happen with Jailton Almeida. If Spivac takes him down, oh boy, Almeida's going to reverse him. He's the much stronger, more gifted of the two. If you want to say maybe Spivac wants to keep it on the feet, if he does, he won't. But if he does, is his chances to knock out Almeida? I don't consider Almeida's chin to be anything great. I think it's kind of low. That is his biggest weakness. If this is a Zelda fight, that is the place you aim, that giant red spot that you have to hit to knock out Ganon. But the God King here ain't going to have that issue. The way he's handling dudes like Curtis Blades, taking him down, the way he's handling Romanov, Spivac has no chance. The only chance he does have is that if Almeida gets tired not finishing Spivac and attempting to finish him. Ultimately, Almeida has just proven to me that he can take anybody down. And on the feet, it's all right. Like, I think he's gone away from that whole teep kick to the body, instant takedown. I think that loss to Curtis Blades has definitely made him a better fighter, because it's one of those, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It wasn't broke for a long time. Didn't need to fix it. Now he does. But Spivac, to me, never been impressed by him. This guy gives up takedowns. He feels too comfortable off of his back. And he's not even that great off of his back. I think he threw up a Hail Mary armbar, and it's just that he caught Tybura sleeping. I don't know. Can't say that I'm wrong because he caught him with it, but still, I just never been impressed by this dude. I mean, when he has the superior grappling over his opponent, he's going to look like a winner. But when he can't do anything, The only time here he's going to be impressive if he keeps it on the feet, but I don't think he's going to be able to keep it on the feet. Give me Almeida by a submission, round number 1. Next bout, we've got Peyton Talbott versus Raoni Barcelos. Now, minus 1,400. Holy hell, for Peyton Talbott, that is rough. It's so rough. But I'm going to ignore the lines, right? Minus 1,400 for Peyton. The comeback on Raoni's plus 775. That number right there, plus 775, will make you think a lot of crazy things. Like, hey, you know what? Barcelos is a accredited wrestler. He's a coral belt in jiu-jitsu. This guy's getting disrespected, man. The boy's getting disrespected, bro. This 9-0 dude, this fucking two-spirit looking motherfucker. No, man, like maybe Barcelos can get this one done. Trust me, I've thought all those things as well. It ain't gonna happen, man. Like I won't even go into it too far about their skill set, but Peyton Talbott has what we call plot armor. This dude's not losing. This dude he's OP. It pisses me off. It pisses me off because I've seen the ways to beat him, and the dudes that I have bet against him to beat him have gone out there and done it, and it still had no use. The dude's a Superman, unfortunately. He is a Superman of bantamweight right now. When you think, hey, man, I think I can, what I can do to beat this guy, I'll take him down. I'll take him down, and I will submit him. And it's like, no, you can't submit the guy. He's just too wriggly. He's a decent enough wrestler. All right, cool. I will outstrike him. I'll hit him in the face and knock him out. I'm like, well, it turns out he's got a great chin. I'm like, damn, okay, what else are you going to do? Like, how about I get him tired? I'll kick him to the body, and I'll get him tired to the point that, like, I'm going to win the decision. Unfortunately, this guy has ridiculous cardio. Hits too damn hard. It pisses me off how he has that kind of like, he was just written by the same dude that wrote Superman. Barcelos, we know, great boxing. Like, on paper, the much better fighter than Peyton Talbott. And if this was, say, 15 years ago, give me Raoni Barcelos all day. He's just aged out. He's 37. His durability's not there. He's going to life and death kind of fights with Christian Quinones, and Christian sucks, man. I remember picking confidently Barcelos to go out there and whip his ass, and he's having competitive matchups with Christian Quinones, and Christian sucks. So he ended up getting me that money, but still, unfortunately, Peyton hits too hard. He's just, at this very moment, the guy, and when we get a much more difficult matchup, we'll go from there. But at this very moment, it's going to be Peyton Talbott to knock him out. He's too vicious, hits too strong. I'm rooting for Barcelos. Don't get me wrong. I want him to win. I'm a big fan of Barcelos. Dude's been making me money for a long time. But ultimately, it comes down to the age, the durability, and just the pure momentum. This guy doesn't seem to have a chink in his armor quite yet. I've seen guys out wrestle him and he still wins. I've seen this guy get outstruck, does not seem phased. He just happens to hit harder. Everything that he throws is more impactful. Give me Peyton to win in the first 2 rounds, knockout, unfortunately. Next bout, we've got Bogdan Guskov versus Billy Elekana. Guskov, what are the odds on him? I saw them earlier. Guskov is minus 350. Comeback on Elekana is plus 260. Original matchup was going to be Johnny Walker. Now, maybe I'm an idiot, guys, but doesn't Guskov train with Walter Walker? And I thought he also trained with Johnny Walker at Gore MMA, and they were going to fight, so I'm not sure what that is about, but ultimately they're not fighting anymore. They got Billy Elekana, who is a former LFA vet and a PFL vet. This guy's 7-1. He has notable wins over Brian Battle in the amateur scene. His only loss was to Daniel Compton, and that was at middleweight. So when I tried to build the narrative immediately, because I didn't want to tape this guy, like why would I want to tape this guy? I just want to get it over with. The narrative was going to be, well, this guy got his ass beat by Daniel Compton. This guy sucks. But no, that was at middleweight, and you can physically tell the difference between him at middleweight and light heavyweight. Like, he looks so scrawny, and it just came down to he was cutting too much weight, and at least in my eyes. I don't know the full backstory. I'm not in his camp or nothing, but it just looked to me that he was cutting too much weight, and the fact that he lost to a guy like Daniel Compton just made him think, I got to move up. And moving up definitely did him well. He has serviceable everything. Decent striking, decent wrestling, decent offensive and defensive wrestling. Okay jiu-jitsu, but nothing too special, nothing massive with the power. He went to a split decision with Chuck Campbell. Chuck Campbell's another one of these guys at light heavyweight, nothing too ridiculously special. He's a bit of an awkward guy, but he shouldn't be going to split decisions with this guy if you're going to beat a guy like Guskov. And Guskov, I have my issues with him, but ultimately what I noticed about the fight, and more or less what I expect to happen, is that Billy Elekana, his chance to beat this guy is to catch him, because Guskov tends to keep his hands low. In his last fight, he did keep his hands pretty high. He still ate some punches, but he does have a very good chin. He has good jiu-jitsu. This guy's a solid fighter. And it ultimately, when I tried fading him on multiple different occasions, I faded him against Uzdemir, it paid off. I faded him against Ryan Spann, did not pay off. Ryan hit him with a nasty right hand, and he ate it like nothing. And this guy has nasty pressure. He's so goofy with those punches, man. He keeps them low, and the way he just swings them, they connect. He's very accurate with those punches. And I think that's what's going to happen here. Billy Elekana likes to keep his distance. He's more of a patient, find my spot, find my strike, and then execute kind of guy. But he does back himself up a lot. And what I expect to happen is that Guskov is going to put that pressure on him, throwing wild techniques to him. And those types of wild techniques are the ones that end up actually cracking Billy Elekana. You see Chuck Campbell doing the same. He's very unconventional. Same with like Daniel Compton. And that pressure is going to eventually break Elekana. And I think he's going to get knocked out. I think either he's going to get knocked out against the cage because he pushes himself there, or he's going to get dropped, and then Guskov's going to attack from there, either go for the finish with the pound, or maybe trying to snatch up a neck or something. But I do expect Guskov to win this fight inside the distance. Now, the threat being that Elekana, not necessarily a terrible counter striker, he's decent. Guskov, if he gets overconfident, which he tends to fight that way sometimes, he's just kind of herky-jerky and shit, I just worry he can get caught. But Billy's not necessarily shown to have that kind of massive power, and I've seen Guskov eat stuff that would like put me in a coma. So give me Guskov to win this one by second round TKO. Next bout, we have got this is the main card opener. We have got Kevin Holland versus Rainier de Ridder, and this is -124. Holland come back on de Ridder +100 very, very easily, but I'm going to go with de Ridder. I don't want to talk about this one too much, because here's the thing. With de Ridder, the narrative is that he's a goofy moron idiot who can't strike, who gets tired, gets beat up by guys, and he gives up on the mat. I get that. I 100% understand that, but there's nuances to that. This guy, the former 2 Division I champion, the guy's a nasty submission artist. This guy will get you to the ground. He's a big dude. This dude, both middleweight champion at 1 and light heavyweight champion. This guy's even said, I have no problem moving up to light heavyweight. He's a big 6'4" guy, awkward striker, not necessarily a guy that I would want to go out there and like have him test his striking with Kevin Holland, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Kevin at middleweight, it's a travesty, because anytime he does fight a better grappler, he tends to get dominated. We've seen it time and time again, whether it be the likes of Marvin Vettori, or the likes of Blonde Brunson, even more recently with Roman Dolidze taking him down. De Ridder, that's his specialty, whether he pulls Kevin Holland to the ground into his guard, whether he takes him down, whether he takes his back and then just kind of pushes off the cage and takes his back at that point. Like, say, if he's kind of riding him in the back, De Ridder is going to take him down no matter what. I expect him to do it eventually, whether at first, second, third, he will get him down. De Ridder, there's the narrative that he's a gasser. He didn't look great against Gerald Meerschaert in his last fight, but to me, that was a tough matchup for him. Gerald is he's a wily dude. He ended up submitting him eventually, but that shows me that a guy who can submit Gerald Meerschaert's only been submitted, I believe, 1 time in MMA, and that would have been against I'm trying to remember without looking who submitted Gerald Meerschaert. I believe it was with a guillotine. See, now I'm bugging about it. I remember looking it up, and I just had plumb forgot about it. The only other person to submit Gerald, and the reason people don't submit Gerald tends to be because they knock him out, was Jack Hermanson with that Joker team. There you go. Would have never remembered. But De Ridder, nasty submission artist, getting inverted triangles on the likes of like Big Dash. I think his jiu-jitsu is going to lead him to the victory here. He even promised that he was going to be more aggressive here against Kevin Holland. And Kevin, I love me some Kevin Holland. It's just that welterweight is where he needs to be. He's having an identity crisis where he keeps going back and forth. And for him to be the favorite, it's a little funky to me. Give me the Ritter to win this one by a submission in the first or second round. I think he'll get it done. Let's move on here. We've got Beneil Dariush versus Makhachev. Renato Moicano. Give me a second. I need to drink some. Mouth got dry. Okay, so minus 200 for money Moicano. Come back on Beneil Dariush is plus 165. I'm going to use a lot of narrative talking points here, but to justify why I'm picking Dariush to win this one by either a decision or knockout. Now, I understand Beneil has been finished in his last 2 fights. Beneil's chin has always been in question. Beneil is up there in age. Beneil's just, we view him almost as a joke. I don't know if you do. Like, I get that feeling from the MMA community. Like, oh, Beneil Dariush, he's a floppy bat. You just knock him out. He's not a threat. And Moicano, all the, plus social credit score points are in his favor because he's knocking dudes out. He's beating the crap out of people. He's handling them on the mat, cutting these promos. We all love the guy. He's hilarious. It'd be a travesty to not hear a Renato Moicano promo in Los Angeles, California. I want to know what he's going to say about them fires and why they're happening and why God is not pleased. I just want to hear all that stuff. So I'm rooting for Moicano to win this specifically just for that. But if I'm being honest, we've got 2 fan favorites of mine. I like me some Moicano. I love Moicano. And particularly, I've always been a fan of Beneil Dariush. He's true blue guy. He's going to be the hometown favorite here. Not born in California, but raised in LA. I forgot where he lives, but hometown boy, Los Angeles, California guy. So crowd's going to be in his favor. But when we're looking at it skill for skill, dude, these guys are like a mirror matchup. They are both equally skilled on the mat, both very good at wrestling. Both chins are a little, Moicano's been cracked. He's been hurt. He's not as durable as he used to be himself. But out of the 2, he's going to be the more durable. Excuse me. Beneil, we know about him. He's been knocked out in horrible, horrible fashion. But when we look at those 2 knockouts, the former champion in Charles Oliveira and the possible soon-to-be champion in Arman Tsarukyan, those aren't bad. What would those 2 guys do to Moicano? Let's be realistic here. And the plot that I'm going to use against Moicano, unfortunately, let's look at his last few fights, right? He got utterly dominated by Rafael Dos Anjos, right? Short notice or not, it kind of shows me where his cap is. And I look at his style and I look at his record, and he's never been a guy to beat some of the elite fighters, right? To me, Beneil isn't at the point as being an elite fighter, but he's close to it, right? But you look at it, he lost to Brian Ortega, an elite fighter, maybe not anymore, but at the time, Jose Aldo, Chan Sung Jung. Then he beats Damir Hadzovic easily. Next fight, a guy in Rafael Fiziev. If you want to build another narrative, Fiziev beat Moicano, and Beneil beat the guy who destroyed the knee of Fiziev in Gamrot, right? And he beats Jai Herbert. He beats Alex Hernandez. Well, I guess you can say that he beat Alex Hernandez, and Alex Hernandez beat Beneil Dariush. So now we're tied there. Rafael Dos Anjos got destroyed. Brad Riddell, Drew Dober, Jalen Turner, Benoit Saint-Denis. So when doing my tape on Moicano, because obviously I'm thinking Moicano's going to come in here and just do his thing. His striking has improved and evolved. What makes me think Beneil is that not only is he going to have the ability to keep it on the mat or keep it off the mat unless he wants to take it there. They're both equally skilled striking. Beneil maybe more power with that overhand left. Nasty body kicks. Dude's been training at King's MMA forever. He trained even with RDA, despite the fact that RDA is not there. I would assume they kind of talked. But what I'm looking at Moicano, and if I'm being honest about his recent performances, right, against, who was this? Brad Riddell, no problem there. I'm not going to question that. He handled them easily. Against Drew Dober, he was losing to Drew Dober, and it was an act of God that Drew Dober went for an ill-timed, horrible takedown that gave Moicano that fight. And it was all predicated on him winning that first round with his superior grappling. He looked tired. He looked sluggish coming the second and third. And that's when Drew Dober was putting it on him. We look at the next fight against Jalen Turner. Jalen knocks him out. He beats his ass, but then Jalen got tired. And I don't think that was a fight that he was supposed to win. But by the grace of God, his toughness, he was able to get on top and beat him. And I hear myself saying this, but it's what I'm seeing as the truth, man. I don't want to necessarily say that it makes Moicano a bad fighter. It's just what I'm noticing. And if I'm even more honest, I bet Moicano in the fight against Benoit Saint-Denis. I picked him to win. And he handled him early in that first round, no problem. And there were some moments there when he's beating his ass on the ground that I just saw the true brilliance of Moicano. Little things like him controlling his body, because you know how wily that dude is from bottom. He's so strong with his butterflies. He was putting up a fight, but the stuff that Moicano was doing, like there was a moment where he put his head on top of Benoit Saint-Denis' head just to kind of push him down and control him as he's like getting the better of the position. Little stuff like that. I'm like, this guy's legit. Very impressive. There was another moment against the cage where he is, I think, in like near the mount position, and he is putting his fist on the cage because they were close to the cage. That way he can maintain like steadiness while he's dropping hammers on him. Beautiful stuff from Moicano. But what happens next is what made me incredibly grateful that my bet on Moicano won, is that he loses the second round. Now, you could say that he was waiting for the ref to kind of stop it because of the injuries that Benoit Saint-Denis suffered, or you can say that he was kind of saving energy because he expanded so much. I think Moicano might have issues with his gas tank, and he kind of has to get lucky. And I hate saying it, but he seems to be one of the guys that has one of the luckiest win streaks. Because to me, man, maybe I'm crazy. I'd like to know your opinion, but when I'm watching that fight against Benoit Saint-Denis, and trust me, man, I'm not a Saint-Denis like nut hugger, because I've been talking about how not great this dude is, tough as fuck, but not necessarily the best fighter. When I look at that fight, he's winning that round number 2. And had it not been for the doctor stoppage, I do think the way he was stuffing those takedowns, the way he was landing on Moicano, there was a good chance this could have gone real south for Moicano had he gotten tired himself. Benny's not going to have that issue. Benny's biggest problem in this fight is not getting knocked out. I think he can win this fight. Give me Dariush. And the other thing, what is a positive for Moicano is that he has fought nothing but southpaws as of late. Drew Dober, southpaw. Jalen Turner, southpaw. Benoit Saint-Denis, southpaw. Benio Dariush, another southpaw. So there's a good thing there for Moicano, the way he caught the kick of Benoit Saint-Denis, which led to the takedown. Beautiful. That ain't going to work here against Benio, who is a nasty scrambler. We've seen it against one of his teammates in Moicano in Gamrot. This guy can scramble for his life. Even going back, I watched the Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, the second one against Benio, and the way he just maintained control, like, give me Benio in this fight. As long as he doesn't get knocked out, I think there's a ton of value on him at plus 165, plus 170 if he's still out there. I think I talked mostly about this one, but I don't know, man. I hope I'm wrong about what I'm talking about Moicano here, because to me, when I'm looking at these fights back to back, I'm seeing a good streak of luckiness. Got saved against Jalen, got saved against Drew Dober by Drew Dober being a bit of an idiot, and then Benoit Saint-Denis, he got saved by that French doctor. Had it been a different never mind, but had it been a different doctor that just allowed it to go through, I think there might have been a chance there that Moicano would have not been as happy with that result. I think it would have been one of those, what was his name? Sodiq Yusuff versus Edson Barbosa, where we're like, oh, no problem. He got his ass down. He knocked him down. Should be easy sailing. And then little by little, we got Edson Barbosa coming back and doing damage. So I don't know. I can't predict what would have happened, but it was looking like that to me. I was even worried at a point that if they didn't stop the fight, Benoit was going to eventually like just grit his way through a decision. But yeah, give me Benio Dariush for those reasons. I think they're equally matched, and I do suspect that there might be a little bit to that Moicano not necessarily having full gas tank going to the later rounds. So we'll see. Next bout, we've got Jamal Hill versus Jiri Prochazka, -110, -110. Dead pick 'em here. Let me, instead of giving you like my quick thoughts, I'm going to read you some stats on these men with starting. So, same height, obviously, 6'3", 6'4". Inch in reach separates both men, with the advantage going to Jiri. Jiri, not really going to use the reach all that great because he's not necessarily like a conventional striker. But the stats I want to read you hopefully speak for themselves. So with significant strikes landed per minute, we've got Jiri Prochazka about 5.38. Let's call it an even 5.5. Striking accuracy, 55%. Strikes absorbed, about 5.5 as well. Defense, pretty low. We know his defense. He likes to get hit, 39%. Now let's look at Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill striking, landing per minute, 7.1. So 7 strikes per minute he lands. That's 2 more strikes per minute than he's landing that Jiri is. Striking accuracy, 54%, not far off. Strikes absorbed, 3.5. He takes less punches and he lands more punches. His defense is a little higher, 46%. As much as I want Jiri to win, I think Jamal Hill's going to knock him out. Jamal Hill, he's on a generational run to ruin his legacy. How many people remember him even being a champion? I barely remember that he beat Glover Teixeira because he's been taking L after L online of his own volition, talking all this crap. And here's the thing, I picked him to beat my beloved Alex Pereira because I did believe he had the tools to do so. Pereira's boxing at that moment has just not been where I wanted it to be, where to now it's just been incredibly evolved. He's moving his head a lot better. He's just a much better boxer than he was at that time. Jamal Hill, he got knocked out, and then he's arguing with Jiri to see who got knocked out worse. And he's like, oh, you got your ass beat worse than I did. I'm like, whoa, dude, like, this is not the look. This is not the look for Jamal Hill. The whole, let's put on the gloves, and Alex throws the gloves down and he just walks away. Like, it's not a good look. And if I'm being honest, I think that's the reason why the line is so close. I think on paper, Jamal Hill, he pieces up Jiri. The fighting will of Jiri gets him through a long way, meaning he can will himself to victory. This guy gets hurt, gets dropped, he'll keep moving forward. That's why I love Jiri Prochazka. I'd like to see him at middleweight. I'd like to see him run through dudes at middleweight with that fun style, but ultimately the way he defends his punches with his face, it isn't going to look good here against Jamal Hill, who is very accurate with those punches. He has a high output, especially at like 3 rounds. He's going to have an even higher output because he's typically going 5 rounds as of late, man. So give me Jamal Hill to knock out Jiri Prochazka in the first 2 rounds. As much as it pains me to say, like, I'm considering going back in on the Jamal Hill money line. And funny enough, I actually, I didn't meet the dude, but I was judging an event. The dude, I remember he seemed super cool. I wanted to talk to him, but I couldn't. I'm an official, and he was cornering a dude. Seemed really nice. So I don't have anything necessarily personal against the dude himself, but just his online persona, he's just been looking real bad. But he seemed really nice to me. He's like, hey, he held the door open for me, man. Like, I'm walking in, he holds the door open for me. Maybe I'm trying to rehabilitate his image because, like, most people don't fucking do that. I hate when people just fucking shut the door on you. Dude held it, didn't have to. So for that, I'm going to pick him. I'm going to bet on him. Give me Jamal Hill. I'll say 2nd round knockout. But if I'm being honest with you, man, even though I'll have money on Jamal Hill, a little piece of me wants Jiri to knock him out. But yeah, give me Jamal. I think primarily that. Like, Jiri really, really uses his pressure and his pace and the ability to take shots to will him to a victory. But when we see guys who are proficient in striking and landing and being accurate, man, it is not pretty for the man. Moving on here, we've got Murad Dvalishvilli versus Umar Nurmagomedov, plus 260 for the champion, which is very funny to me that the champ is a big underdog against Umar Nurmagomedov, minus 350. When I was at Noche UFC, they had a booth for Umar Nurmagomedov. Not sure why at the time. Now I know why. The UFC wants him to be the champion. He's 18-0. He's going to be the bigger dude, 5'8", 1 inch in reach, and I expect they're going to do what they can to get the belt on him. I don't think that the UFC is in love with Merab winning the belt from Sean O'Malley. Being at that event, that fight just sucked the energy out of the room. After the energy had been sucked out by Valentino just grappling. And more so, it wasn't Valentina grappling, it was Alexa Grasso just sucking at fighting. Apparently, she just forgot how to fight. The Mexican fighting spirit had just like, evaporated from her body. But ultimately, the way I see this fight, I don't want to spend too much time on it. There's been back and forth as to who's going to win and why and what. The way I view Dvalishvilli is that he's the only guy I've ever really known or have seen to win a fight just spamming takedowns and having them deflected, and that was against Peter Yan. Yes, he did win the striking against Peter. He didn't necessarily do anything too spectacular, but that is his biggest threat. The threat of the takedown and takedown attempts are his biggest threat. Umar, maybe not as well-conditioned as Merab, because that's his other big up there, is that he has a great cardio. Umar, I think he's better in the striking. He's better at keeping distance. I believe he can wrestle just as good as Merab. It's just that his cardio is not going to be there. The way I see this fight going ultimately is that, they've been going back and forth with each other. Merab talking crap about like, oh, what's your favorite moment with your cousins? Is like, oh, bathtub. I'm like, oh, fuck, he cooked him there. But Umar, as much as I really don't necessarily love Umar's style, like his last fight, I thought he did exactly what I expected him to, just getting takedowns, but he didn't look great. But that was against a much bigger opponent. He's the bigger guy here. He still managed to win in that fight. He didn't look great, but he still managed to win against Corey Sandhagen. But here, him having equally as good as wrestling as Merab, being able to stuff the takedowns, it'd be crazy if Merab just ragdolls him, which I'm expecting him to want to try to do. But with Umar's number one ability being the kicking game, that's what's going to win him this fight. He's going to land kicks at distance. He's going to kick him to the body. When O'Malley teeped Merab to the body and he didn't follow up with it, that was his one moment to really steal the fight back. And if Umar can do so, he might be viewed as a wrestler if you just now watch, and if you've only watched his fight in the UFC, you would view him as a wrestler. But this guy has some dynamic kicks. This guy is very awkward sometimes with his punches, but his kicks are definitely his number one weapon. And I would expect him to target the body of Merab. That's how you slow down the cardio machine, and that's how you hurt him. I mean, he's been hurt before as well. If a high kick lands on his head, wouldn't be surprised if he knocks him out. But ultimately, I will go with Umar to win this one. I'm going to say a decision. I think Merab, he doesn't like Russians. So I respect the fact that he's like, I'm not losing to a Russian. So I doubt he's going to try to accept a knockout to a Nurmagomedov. So give me Umar to win this one by decision. I'm not thrilled about it. I'm very intrigued. The main reason I kind of talked myself out of going to UFC 311 in Los Angeles was I wasn't thrilled about this fight. I wasn't like hyped about it. The way that Merab's been like mean mugging and talking shit got me more invested, and that's typically what a champion should do. I had zero interest in this fight, now I do, and I give that prop to both these men. They were going at it, gets me more motivated to see it. But yeah, give me Nurmagomedov to eke this one by. I think Merab can win a couple rounds early, maybe one, but eventually, as long as Nurmagomedov's cardio holds up, I think he's going to run through him eventually. Rounds number, say, 4 to 5, or sorry, rounds number 2 to 5, he'll sneak him by and he'll get that decision. Even if it becomes a lot closer, I would expect Nurmagomedov to get that decision here, because the UFC machine really would like to have Umar win that belt, because they really think that there's going to be 2 Nurmagomedov champions as UFC champs, which may or may not be the case, because the main event here, we've got Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan 2. Now, plus 320 on Arman is ridiculous, I think, at a 5-round fight against the minus 410 Islam Makhachev, who has not been looking minus 410, minus 5, minus 300 in a while. Like his last few title fights, the last one in particular, not a great look. Fought Dustin Poirier. He eventually got him. He eventually submitted him, but he had a lot of trouble holding him down. And it just shows to me it's very possible that the cut to lightweight is taking a toll on Islam. I think he's been talking about as well about moving up and wanting to contend for the 170 title. And that to me spells that maybe his time at 155 is nearing the end because his body's just not being able to take it. If you remember the Alexander Volkanovski win in Sydney, I believe, in Australia, I would say, and the IV incident where they're not allowed to have IVs in Australia. Well, he did not look good there. He arguably lost that fight to Alexander. He didn't. It sucks for me to say he didn't lose that fight, but it was very close to a smaller man who is not known for his counter wrestling. And his next bout against Volkanovski, older Volkanovski got caught with a head kick. So the positives, what we know about Islam: great wrestling, very strong dude, good striker, not a bad striker at all. But now he's facing a guy that he's fought before, who he fought on short notice, in Arman Tsarukyan, who is incredibly hungry, not only to win the title, he is money hungry. This dude, I heard him recently saying, like, if I win this title, I'm done defending it. Like, I don't care about the title anymore. I'm going to just focus on making money, like a true Armenian. Now, he is going to be fighting in Los Angeles. If you don't know, Glendale, California, huge Armenian population. This crowd is going to be pro Arman Tsarukyan. Now, the first fight, you go back, and not to base everything around that first fight, very close, very, very close exchanges. I initially, when watching it live, I remember thinking maybe this Arman kid pulled it off because they were so close at certain times, I think round number 2 and round number 1, that maybe Arman could have sneaked by, but it was in Russia, never was going to happen. Arman's takedown, Arman is the first man to actually take down Islam in the UFC. Mind you, it wasn't a clean takedown in my eyes, but they gave it to him. His ability and his progression in the UFC has been astounding to me. You can say, hey, well, he nearly got submitted by the likes of Charles Oliveira, went to a split. Despite me, unfortunately, betting Charles in that spot and thinking that at the time, I was being very biased. But despite that, what we saw is that his ability to defend the submission, he was in some tight submissions there. He defended them well. He showed composure and poise. He showed everything I need to see from a guy that is contending for the title, that won't give up, that won't just quick tap. If he gets put in a bad position, he's definitely not going to give up there. And what I see is that he actually, in my eyes, fought a much tougher opponent in Charles than the Charles that Islam fought. The Charles that Islam fought was willy-nilly, I'll go out here, go life and death. He fought a much smarter Charles Oliveira in his fight. I think it showed there, right? It proved that he was able to contend with a number 1 contender in Tsarukyan. And you keep going down the list. He knocks out Beneil Dariush. I really thought Beneil was going to be able to give him fits. Knocks him out. He showed power in the punches. We know that Tsarukyan's striking has evolved. He's got great flexibility, great kicks. His boxing has improved definitely. His wrestling, this guy is incredibly athletic as well, the younger man. He's not going to be dehydrating himself severely like Islam is, who's a 170er. I'm leaning Arman Tsarukyan to win this fight. I mean, I've been kind of keeping an eye on Arman because I've never been sure about the guy, but he's been handling each test and passing them. And even though he's been struggling in certain occasions, within those struggles, there's those little small battles that he's still winning. So give me Arman to win this one. I think it's his time right now. I think he's talking about this special technique. Now, I don't want to spoil anything. I don't know, but he's saying it's something I've never thrown. I'm thinking it's going to be a flying knee, right? ATT, he's been training with those guys there. I think it's going to be a flying knee. I think it's going to be like he's planning on Islam to shoot on him. And with Islam's, his takedowns as of late, they've just not been as impactful. He's just a strong dude. And Islam's been slowing down. I'm thinking Arman's going to try to catch him with a flying knee. So bookmark this if you want to call me a dumbass if it doesn't happen. But that's my guess. But that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. Like, Islam has been looking less and less as a superhuman the higher the competition gets. And the first time I saw that was against Arman. And that was at short notice. And that's what made me think Arman's going to be the next guy. And if I'm being honest as well, the loss to Gamrot might have been a very good thing for Arman to evolve his game, knowing that the minutes count more than what you do. He was landing great kicks. He was doing good stuff, getting takedowns despite the, Gamrot kind of rolling out and getting back to his feet. But it showed to me that this guy is more than ready to be the champion. So again, give me Arman Tsarukyan to win this fight. I'm going to say a decision out of respect because this is the champion. I see him taking over in the later rounds number 3, 4, and 5. I think he's going to put a pressure on Islam. He's going to try to out-grapple him. It won't happen early, but that fatigue will start setting in. The strikes will be a lot cleaner. And with that Armenian just chanting going on, this dude's going to request that his belt be a white leather belt with the gold on it. That way it matches his white and gold BMW. He'll be parading up and down the Glendale Galleria with a big parade of Armenians following behind him. So get me Arman Tsarukyan to win this one by a decision. But yeah, those are my thoughts on UFC 311. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Let me know what you think about the setup. Like, the camera that I'm using right now is a little different. It won't be the last one. Pain in the ass to set up, by the way. It's a, Osmo 3. Pain in the ass because it's a wide-angle lens. But, yeah, I'd like to know what you think about this card. If, again, you are going, never been to LA, you can hit me up. I'll give you some advice as to what's a good chicken spot, good, like, barbecue spots, etc. Again, Johnny, TigerBomb MMA. I will see you next week.